There are moments in history when everything changes, when one piece of technology becomes so powerful that it shifts the entire balance of war. And in the Pacific during World War II, that moment came with a weapon system most people have never heard of. The Mark 37 fire control system, and I know what you're thinking. A fire control system doesn't sound like something that would devastate Japanese naval operations across thousands of miles of ocean. But this wasn't just any targeting system. This was American engineering at its absolute finest, paired with devastating 5-inch guns on our destroyers and cruisers, creating a combination so lethal that Japanese commanders learned to fear the very sight of American warships on the horizon. Picture yourself standing on the deck of a Japanese transport ship in 1944, somewhere in the warm waters near the Philippines. You're part of a convoy carrying desperately needed supplies to Japanese forces. You have destroyer escorts. You've planned your route carefully, and for a moment you feel safe. But then American ships appear in the distance, and within minutes your world becomes fire and chaos as shells rain down with impossible accuracy, tearing through steel and setting your ship ablaze. And this happened over and over again throughout the Pacific War. Not because of luck or superior numbers, but because American naval forces possessed technology that was simply years ahead of anything Japan could feel. The Mark 37 wasn't born overnight, it came from necessity. Because in the early years of the Pacific War, American commanders realized their existing fire control systems were good, but not great. They needed something revolutionary, something that would give their gunners an overwhelming advantage in every engagement. So American engineers went to work creating what would become one of the most important weapons systems of the entire war. Weighing about 4,000 pounds and stretching 7 feet in length, the Mark 37 was a marvel of electromechanical engineering, using electrical servos and mechanical computers to calculate firing solutions with precision that seemed almost magical for the 1940s. The system could take in data from radar, from optical sights, from human spotters, and process all that information simultaneously to determine exactly where to aim and when to fire. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Mark 37 could track moving targets and predict where they would be in the future. This wasn't guesswork. This was calculated prediction based on speed and course. So if a Japanese destroyer was racing across the ocean at 25 knots and making a hard turn, the Mark 37's mechanical brain would instantly recalculate where that ship would be when the shells arrived and adjust the guns accordingly. The 5-inch 50 caliber guns paired with this system were devastating weapons. Each shell weighed 54 pounds and carried high explosives that could punch through steel and detonate inside a ship's hull. These guns could fire 15 to 20 rounds per minute, which meant continuous accurate fire that could pound a target into submission. And when mounted in twin configurations on American cruisers and destroyers, the firepower was absolutely overwhelming. Multiple gun mounts working together under the direction of Mark 37 systems could engage several targets simultaneously, while maintaining devastating accuracy on each one. During major naval battles in the Philippine Sea and surrounding waters, the Mark 37 demonstrated its complete dominance. American task forces would encounter Japanese convoys, and what followed was systematic destruction. The Mark 37 would lock onto a cargo ship, calculate the perfect firing solution, and within minutes, that ship would be a burning wreck sliding beneath the waves. Then the system would pivot to the next target and repeat the process with machine-like efficiency. And the psychological impact on Japanese sailors and commanders was profound. They knew that when American warships appeared, their convoy operations were essentially finished. They would lose ships, lose supplies, lose men, and there was no effective counter to the accuracy and speed of American gunnery. Japanese destroyers and cruisers had older fire control systems that relied heavily on manual calculation and optical sighting, which meant their salvos were far less accurate and took much longer to correct. By the time a Japanese gunner adjusted his aim for a second shot, American gunners, guided by the Mark 37, had already placed half a dozen accurate rounds on target. The technological gap wasn't just an advantage. It was a chasm that Japanese forces simply couldn't cross. Let me take you through what actually happened during one devastating convoy engagement in 1944. Japanese command organized a major resupply operation heading toward the Philippines. Dozens of transport ships and cargo vessels protected by destroyers and cruisers. The Japanese commander felt confident because he had calculated the risks and arranged fighter cover from nearby airfields. But his calculations didn't account for what American technology could do. Our task force appeared at dawn, and long-range radar on our cruisers detected the Japanese convoy at roughly 18,000 yards, almost 10 miles away. This distance was where the Mark 37 system absolutely dominated because Japanese optical systems couldn't reliably spot targets at that range. Their fire control systems weren't designed for such distances, but our Mark 37 systems locked on immediately using radar guidance and began calculating firing solutions while the Japanese were still trying to figure out if we were really there. The engagement opened with a wall of accurate fire. American 5-inch shells, precisely calculated and perfectly timed, began falling on the Japanese convoy like a steel rainstorm. The first volley hit 3 transport ships almost simultaneously. One cargo vessel of about 8,000 tons took 2 direct hits that punched through the hull and exploded in the cargo holds. Within minutes, the ship was engulfed in flames and sinking. Her crew of about 130 men abandoned ship and swam desperately for their lives as their vessel disappeared beneath the waves. Japanese destroyers tried to respond by turning toward our task force, attempting to close the distance and bring their guns to bear. But here's where the Mark 37 showed its absolute superiority, as these enemy ships maneuvered to attack. The system automatically recalculated firing solutions for every change in course and speed. American gunners tracking these fast-moving targets maintained accuracy that Japanese forces simply couldn't match. Our shells landed exactly where we intended them to land, right on target. One Japanese destroyer made a desperate run at our cruiser formation, moving at about 35 knots with her crew determined to close the distance and launch torpedoes. But the Mark 37 systems locked onto this maneuvering target and calculated its trajectory perfectly. American cruiser gunners fired coordinated volleys, and 10 5-inch shells arrived at the destroyer's position in a devastating salvo. 4 direct hits shattered the ship, tearing apart her superstructure and flooding her engine rooms. She was sinking within 5 minutes, her crew scrambling to abandon ship as the ocean claimed their vessel. This pattern repeated throughout the engagement. Japanese transport ships without adequate defenses were systematically destroyed. One after another, they were hit, set ablaze, and sent to the bottom. The cargo they carried, desperately needed supplies for Japanese forces in the Philippines, scattered across the ocean floor. Japanese sailors in lifeboats watched helplessly as their entire convoy was annihilated before their eyes. And the Mark 37 fire control system made this devastation possible. Superior technology combined with superior training and superior tactics resulted in a completely one-sided naval engagement. What really separated the Mark 37 from everything else was its radar integration. And we're talking about radar technology that was revolutionary for the 1940s. The Mark 8 and Mark 12 radar systems mounted on American warships could detect enemy vessels at ranges exceeding 20,000 yards and track them continuously throughout an engagement. The Mark 37 could receive data directly from these radars and incorporate that information into firing calculations in real time. And for the Japanese Navy, this was absolutely devastating. Japanese ships had some radar installations, but they were inferior, unreliable, and didn't integrate with their fire control systems the way American technology did. When Japanese gunners tried to engage American ships at night or in poor visibility, they were essentially shooting blind, making educated guesses based on incomplete information. Meanwhile, American gunners, guided by Mark 37 systems and fed targeting data from radar, were hitting targets with devastating accuracy in conditions where Japanese guns simply couldn't operate effectively. The psychological impact of this technological advantage cannot be overstated. Japanese convoy commanders knew that when American naval forces appeared with this fire control technology, their ships were going to be hit. There was no running, no hiding, no tactical solution that would prevent the destruction of their convoy. American ships could engage at ranges where Japanese vessels couldn't fight back effectively, and American shells would arrive on target with consistency that seemed almost supernatural to Japanese sailors experiencing this technology for the first time. Consider what was happening from a technical standpoint. A 5-inch shell weighing 54 pounds and carrying about 1 pound of high explosives could penetrate several inches of steel armor plating. When multiple shells, precisely aimed and perfectly coordinated, struck a cargo ship in rapid succession, they caused catastrophic damage. Fires would spread rapidly through cargo holds. Hull breaches would flood compartments with seawater. Structural integrity would fail. Ships that took 3 or 4 direct hits from 5-inch shells were essentially finished. Going down quickly, the only question was how fast the ocean would claim them. The Mark 37 ensured these hits were consistent and overwhelming. American fire control officers working with sophisticated electromechanical computers could process multiple targets simultaneously. While one gun mount engaged a destroyer, another could track and engage a transport ship. The system allowed for division of targets, coordination of fire, and overwhelming concentration of force against high-priority threats. Japanese convoy escorts simply couldn't respond to this level of coordinated firepower. They were outmatched in technology, outmatched in training, outmatched in every way that mattered. There's something fascinating about what the Mark 37 represented. It showed American faith in technology as a solution to tactical problems. American naval engineers believed that superior technology combined with industrial capacity could overcome numerical disadvantages and tactical challenges. And they were absolutely right. The Mark 37 proved that belief time and again throughout the Pacific War, taking the superior training of American sailors and combining it with superior equipment to create a naval system that was simply unstoppable. By 1944 and 1945, the Japanese Navy was essentially finished as an effective fighting force in surface combat. They lacked the technology, training, and resources to counter American naval superiority. And the Mark 37 fire control system was a huge part of that story. It was the technological embodiment of American naval dominance, delivering devastating results against Japanese convoy operations throughout the latter half of the war. Let's talk about the specific ships that mounted the Mark 37 and what they could deliver in combat. American Cleveland-class light cruisers packed with firepower typically mounted 12 5-inch guns arranged in 6 twin mounts. Each twin mount had its own Mark 37 system, which meant a single Cleveland-class cruiser was essentially 6 independent weapon systems operating in perfect coordination. When these ships opened fire on Japanese convoys, it was like a precision machine of destruction, unleashing itself on enemy targets. The Fargo-class light cruisers that came later represented the peak of American light cruiser design. These ships, about 610 feet long and displacing 6,000 tons, were floating fortresses of American firepower, carrying 12 5-inch guns with Mark 37 fire control. During the later stages of the Pacific War, these vessels participated in countless convoy interception operations and dominated every engagement they entered. American heavy cruisers like the New Orleans class and Baltimore class were even more devastating. These ships, displacing about 10,000 tons and measuring roughly 600 feet in length, mounted 8-inch main guns alongside 5-inch secondary batteries. The 5-inch guns on these heavy cruisers also had Mark 37 fire control systems, which meant even their secondary armament was deadly accurate. Japanese convoy operations became virtually impossible whenever American heavy cruisers were operating in an area. Then there were the American destroyers, ships like the Fletcher class and Gearing class destroyers, about 2,000 tons and measuring around 370 feet in length. These vessels carried 5-inch guns equipped with Mark 37 systems. These destroyers, fast and maneuverable, could be positioned ahead of task forces to screen for enemy vessels and provide additional firepower during convoy engagements. A single Fletcher-class destroyer could absolutely shred an unescorted Japanese merchant ship with accurate 5-inch fire. The firepower that could be concentrated on a Japanese convoy when an American task force appeared was overwhelming. Imagine a task force with 2 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 6 destroyers, all equipped with Mark 37 fire control systems Encountering a Japanese convoy of 20 transport ships. What happens next is predictable. Within the first few minutes, multiple Japanese vessels are hit and begin sinking. Japanese escorts attempt to respond but are immediately targeted by American heavy cruiser fire. Within 10 to 15 minutes, the engagement is essentially over. Half the convoy has been sunk or set ablaze, the remaining ships desperately attempting to scatter and escape. The problem for Japanese commanders was they couldn't effectively defend their convoys against this level of American firepower. They couldn't add enough escorts to make a difference because they simply didn't have enough destroyers and cruisers available. They couldn't fight back effectively because their fire control systems weren't accurate enough. They couldn't outrun American task forces because our ships were faster, and our radar allowed us to track them across enormous distances. The only strategy left was minimizing losses by breaking convoys into smaller groups and routing them through areas where American forces weren't expected. But American naval intelligence was highly effective. Reconnaissance aircraft operated throughout the Pacific. Submarines reported on Japanese fleet movements. When Japanese convoys were routed through supposedly safe waters, they frequently encountered American task forces waiting for them. And the Mark 37 fire control system ensured that when these encounters happened, they ended with American victories and Japanese losses. The Japanese Navy, facing technological disadvantages and unable to counter American naval superiority, gradually saw its convoy operations become impossible to sustain. This was naval warfare in the age of American technological dominance, where superior systems combined with superior crews created results that were absolutely one-sided. I want to share some specific historical examples of what the Mark 37 accomplished during actual operations. During the Battle of Surigao Strait in October 1944, Japanese naval forces attempted to push through American defensive positions to attack our invasion fleet at Leyte. American destroyers equipped with Mark 37 systems and 5-inch guns launched coordinated torpedo and gunfire attacks against Japanese capital ships. The Mark 37 allowed American destroyer crews to maintain accurate fire even at night, in challenging visibility conditions, contributing to the complete destruction of Japanese forces in that engagement. Later during the Okinawa campaign in 1945, Japanese convoy operations were decimated by American naval forces. When Japanese attempted to resupply their forces or maintain shrinking supply lines, they were consistently intercepted by American task forces. Every time American ships equipped with Mark 37 systems engaged Japanese convoys, the results were the same. The convoys were destroyed. Japanese survivors described the experience as absolutely devastating. Ships that had sailed confidently toward their destinations would suddenly be engulfed in accurate fire and sink into the Pacific. Consider what this meant strategically. The Japanese military was fighting a defensive war across an enormous geographic area, with forces scattered throughout the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and Pacific Islands. These forces needed constant resupply of food, ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies, all transported by convoy from Japanese-held territories to forward areas. But American naval superiority enabled by the Mark 37 made effective resupply operations virtually impossible. Japanese forces in forward areas were increasingly cut off from supplies. This logistical strangling of Japanese forces contributed significantly to their eventual collapse in 1945. The training American sailors received on the Mark 37 system was exceptional. Naval gunnery schools taught crews how to use the system effectively, how to interpret targeting data, how to make real-time adjustments based on observed results. Crews practiced extensively and became intimately familiar with every aspect of how the Mark 37 operated. By the later stages of the war, American destroyer crews were executing gunnery procedures with remarkable proficiency, able to place accurate fire on target within minutes of detecting an enemy. Japanese gunnery training, by contrast, was becoming increasingly inadequate as the war progressed. Experienced Japanese gunners were being killed faster than they could be replaced. Training programs were disrupted by American attacks on naval bases. Replacement personnel entering the Japanese Navy often had minimal training compared to veteran crews. When these inexperienced Japanese gunners tried to engage American forces equipped with Mark 37 systems, they were outmatched in every conceivable way. Experience was facing technology, and technology was winning decisively. The impact of Mark 37 equipped American naval forces on Japanese convoy operations cannot be overstated. By 1945, Japanese logistical operations were in complete chaos. Supply convoys were being hunted to destruction, commanders desperately trying to find ways to transport essential supplies without being decimated by American firepower. Some Japanese convoys broke into extremely small dispersed groups, hoping scattered vessels would be harder to intercept than organized formations. But American naval forces operating with superior radar and fire control still managed to find and destroy these scattered groups. The Mark 37 fire control system was integral to American naval dominance in the Pacific theater. It was the technological edge that transformed American naval superiority from a general advantage into overwhelming dominance. Japanese naval forces simply could not counter this technology effectively. The result was inevitable. American forces, equipped with Mark 37 systems and crewed by well-trained sailors, dominated every surface engagement they participated in. Japanese convoys were systematically destroyed, and the Japanese military was gradually starved of supplies needed to sustain its war effort. This is the story of American technological superiority, and how that superiority translated into devastating military victories against Japanese forces in the Pacific. The Mark 37 fire control system represented the culmination of American naval engineering, innovation, and commitment to maintaining technological dominance. When paired with well-trained crews and superior ships, the Mark 37 proved unstoppable. Japanese convoys that encountered American naval forces equipped with this technology were systematically destroyed. Japanese commanders learned to dread the presence of American task forces because they knew what was coming. They knew their convoys would be decimated, their ships would burn, their sailors would die. The Mark 37 wasn't just a weapon system, it was a symbol of American military superiority, representing everything that made American forces so effective in the Pacific War. Superior technology, superior training, superior tactics, and superior resources all combined to create a military force that was absolutely unstoppable. Japanese naval forces couldn't counter the Mark 37. They lacked the technology, the resources, the training to respond effectively to American naval dominance. As a result, they lost convoy after convoy, supply line after supply line, and ultimately the ability to sustain military operations across the Pacific. This is the legacy of American naval power in World War II. This is how American innovation and engineering excellence combined with the courage and skill of American sailors to dominate our enemies on the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean, ensuring victory in one of history's greatest conflicts. And while the Mark 37 fire control system may not be as famous as aircraft carriers or battleships, it was absolutely essential to American success. A technological marvel that changed naval warfare forever and helped secure Allied victory in the Pacific theater.